Recording in progress. Here we go. So can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
Is that a thing? Oh, that's
yeah,
awesome.
sounds good.
That's awesome. So what are we calling this thing? How are we actually starting?
Yeah, I don't know it. Well, let's get into it first. Like, I guess the intro would be is we're brothers, and yeah, we're having a go at the whole podcast thing, which is definitely a growing phenomena. So we'll give it a go. We're gonna post it on your YouTube channel. And one thing, like, I've found, like, there's a few other podcasts that I follow,
Yep.
and or YouTube channels, and they all started off like under one name and then ended up, you
Yeah.
know, they've been through a series of names. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
branding is an evolving process, you know.
yeah,
I mean,
it's
sometimes it's good to know when you want to hang on to a brand. Like I would say the Beatles and Paul McCartney and John Lennon are kind of a prime example of that. As soon as they lost the Beatles brand, nobody heard of them.
yeah,
One of them got shot, you know what I mean? So
exactly. And so obviously it looks like we're gonna start this on YouTube and your YouTube channel. Like you said, the name was Comparative YouTube. Like that's just the
that's the name of my channel. Yeah, the logo so far is you remember Kirby Crystal Shards?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So you've seen it on my Facebook. Yeah, so
yeah,
that's my logo because basically what I identify is like you know, ultimately I'm a pretty loving guy. This is great for the intro material. I'm a pretty loving guy. You can do your own version for yourself after this. Um, I'm cuddly. I've gotten back into wearing a beard because it's just nice. It's soft. It's like, you know, and but I also have very spiky views.
yeah,
And crucially, my spiky views are very different from each other, but they're all spiky.
yeah. You
So
know,
that's why it's the most perfect image for me, you know, and I'm
yeah,
gonna do a stop motion where I kind of make it a combination of Kirby and Totoro, but that's like my own thing. You
yeah.
don't know Totoro yet, but you will know Totoro soon. It's going to be Hudson's like fifth movie or whatever, you know,
Okay.
whenever I babysit him. But we'll
Yeah,
talk about that later.
yeah. But it's funny, like we may as well get into the weird stuff. I do think we'll definitely hit on like some more, um, I guess, nostalgic and or nerdy stuff, like on that Kirby Crystal Shard thing, that specific power. Like I think it's two spikes, right?
Yeah, yeah, double
Um,
spike.
yeah,
Uh,
and it's funny because like I remember playing that game, and like I would basically, you would try and like plan the level so you can get something, like, and I very much hated double spikes because
really?
because I found the single spike just looked cooler in general.
What
And
was the single spike though? Like coral almost like that Pokemon coral, but it was just like
yeah,
all pink spikes, right?
exactly. So
Yeah, like a
it
spiky
was just
disco ball.
aura.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then,
yeah. That's interesting. So you're single spike, I'm double spike.
yeah, or well, basically
Ooh,
what I was getting into is like it's funny that you like pick that and it's like as a description of you, because like I would play through a level and be like, yeah, like I'm down to rock with like a boomerang, but I don't want to deal with like the double spike. Like
yeah.
basically, like,
Ooh,
no,
what was double boomerang when it was the big? Was
yeah,
that spike and boomerang? Was
you
boomerang
would
its
throw
own
basically your
ability?
whole body.
Yeah, but it became giant and it had teeth on it.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, basically what I'm getting at, it's just cool. Like that's a very old game, but basically you're played as a character that could pick all these different like archetypes or personalities. So it's fun.
Yeah, yeah, no, honestly, we could do with old Nintendo games what Jordan Peterson did with Pinocchio. Have you seen his Pinocchio stuff?
No.
Oh, it's on YouTube, man. You should really watch it. It's really fat. We should watch it as a family, honestly. Like you, me, and Billy, like watch Pinocchio. And then like every half hour, like watch the Jordan Peterson talks.
Yeah,
They're really interesting. They honestly really helped me clarify my goals.
for sure.
Yeah.
Very yeah, well, he's definitely making headlines these days, but
When
definitely
you write a headline, it's easy to make headlines.
exactly. Okay, I did want it to knock into the YouTube channel though. So explain the name. What kind of videos do you have now? and obviously
Right. Okay. So
you'll have
that's a fair question. What I decided to do for the description of it is kind of leave up this random description that happened to be there when I just started a random YouTube account a while, like 10 years ago.
yeah.
So, because I love the trend. I don't participate because I'm not good. I haven't been good in the last 12 years at documenting my life. Uh, I haven't taken a lot of selfies. Uh, so,
Yeah.
so I don't really have like a 2014, 2012 like picture comparison, like everybody's doing that on Facebook. Maybe
Yeah.
you don't because you're probably not, wasting your time with that nonsense. But anyways, you get the idea, a before and after photo. So I decided to leave a before and after channel description. And what I was trying to express with it is that not much has changed, but so it basically follows the same format. But I won't read it now, but basically the most recent videos I've made was my stop motion videos. I made those during the pandemic. I did cheap art cardboard, hand painted stop motion videos, kind of using real life objects with the cardboard in symbolic ways. And then I did the soundtracks for both of those videos. So it was like a full production. It was just, what I was able to do for fun in the pandemic. Today I made a killer guided meditation in one of my classes. That's going to go up. I'd like to get into the guided meditation thing. But then there's basically going to be like, again, like the Spiky Kirby, there's going to be like a few different formats. Like I like to think of myself primarily as trained in music.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you think about like somebody like Beethoven, he's known for his symphonies, right? Like da 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 da.
Yeah.
But he's also known for this little one, right? Yeah, da dee da dee da dee do, right? And that's just piano. And he's got an opera, he's got string quartets. So I really want to see the YouTube channel like that. So I'll have some 12-minute videos. You'll find this funny. I haven't told you about this. This is a project. My friends could vouch on this for me.
Yeah.
I've been talking about a project since about 2017, maybe even earlier, called The Book of John.
Okay.
Because of particularly because of this guy John Cage, who's famous. I'm not going to get into it, but there's a lot of really interesting Johns, like the Gospel of John, also the Apocalypse, the Revelations.
Yeah.
That's actually written by somebody also named John. So there's really interesting ways to kind of do this kind of, one of the people I really like is Eric Ann, and he has this series of plays called the Saint Plays. Let this be the last thing I say, and then we need to get your introduction in. But it's the Saint Plays, and it's like these postmodern revisions of the saints. And so I think it would be really cool to make a kind of a YouTube, like almost like a mass where like I read some of the Bible, but I also read some of John Cage, and then I like just talk about like, hey, like like he wasn't necessarily Christian, but here are some of the ways that those ideas line up. He really talks about listening.
Yeah.
And I've been really experiencing listening to the world as his main message. And so I'd like to do a project about that. And I think with Revelations, it's interesting because of the big, there's climate change, there's the metaverse, there's Elon Musk taking us to Mars. So it feels like, there's big apocalyptic forces, there's convoys of freedom running down. It's the apocalypse. Let's read about it. So that's the kind of thing, so that might be a longer video. And then there'll be like, I really like the 12-minute explainer video or the 12-minute kind of short documentary. And then I recognize the need to have like 5 minutes. So I'm just gonna, I'd love to do like a food tube / book tube thing, where I just cook like cool recipes, mainly with like junk food and, and like somewhere in the middle of like Chef John from foodwishes.com and Epic Mealtime.
Yeah.
But it's smart, instead of stupid.
Yeah.
So I'd love to do that, so
That's funny.
yeah. And I just thought Comparative YouTube was a good channel because the act of doing it is about like my take on YouTube. It's about really investigating what is YouTube as an aesthetic field.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. So who are you, man?
Yeah. Well, do something. I'll try and pivot it into like where I think we're going. Like we'll stay on the topic of the channel. So like obviously we're launching this podcast for this channel, and like who knows, I can't remember if we mentioned this in recording or before when we were talking, just like how certain channels kind of evolve or split into different kind of brands and stuff. So so it'd be cool to run this and see kind of where it goes, if it ends up being like a separate channel or we end in we aim for one thing and it kind of veers into something else. Like I think there's definitely a lot of potential for something here. We just gotta kind of throw spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks, and then make a video about junk food. But like basically what I'm getting at, and where I think we're gonna start is like we're kind of gonna be like the newscast of podcasts, or we'll comment on the podcasts that we consume. And,
right. Yeah, absolutely.
It is all the rage today, and like I'll start with like one that I kind of do enjoy. More just I enjoy I enjoy the podcast, but honestly I don't think I very often listen to like a full podcast. It's Timcast IRL. I think I might have told you about it.
Oh, is that Tim Ferriss?
Tim Pool.
Oh, Tim Pool. Okay, I don't know him.
Yeah.
Timcast IRL.
Yeah. So well, anyways, he has his YouTube channel and his podcast and stuff, but basically it splits into three main channels. I believe there might be some more, but there's Tim Pool, and then there's Timcast IRL, and then there's the Cast Castle. And the Cast Castle is like more the behind the scenes of the Timcast IRL, and they have this huge like country house property. So it's like it's like a booming podcast news kind of independent news, more or less. But yeah, they're on this like compound where they're trying to produce a percentage of their like what they consume and stuff. So pretty interesting. Anyways,
fascinating.
Yeah. Anyways, I'm getting into a bit of a ramble, but it kind of leads into to what we are going to do and what I personally will do. Like so obviously I'm running a business, Solar Metals, welding and manufacturing company, and also kind of splitting on its own into like a fitness end of the business. So it's like it's almost like to the point where it will probably end up like splitting in two ways. But that's what I think. Like each business will probably have a YouTube video, and it's gonna require all this online content that's all the rage these days. And if we don't take a stab at it like we're doing now, then who knows what it's going to be. So I think it's going to become more of the norm, where many people kind of have like basically these forums of communicating different parts of their lives. So obviously we're going to have like the family business life, and where that all mixes between me and you as brothers, but also like you said, like you're really into to music, and that'll split into like a whole different company. And like we're both going and like like very different but same like so
absolutely.
But yeah, so anyways, that's me. I'm running a business, learning lessons on the daily, and working hard and working late.
Running a business, but not just running a business. Running a business basically started in the middle of a pandemic after you just bought a house. I won't go into other details. I'll let you talk about your personal life, how you want to do it. But you also showed up like week after week at these markets, which were kind of annoying, but they were kind of like a necessary first step
Yeah.
to be one of the, like, there was only like 5 new businesses at the Ottawa Christmas market this year. And I'm sure you've done your number crunching, but the way you were talking about it, you kind of crushed it,
Yeah, yeah,
given everything, right? And so you're not just a small business owner.
yeah, yeah, for sure. No, it's true, Peter. And like my goal is to like on my posts and stuff, like I do the the hashtag small business, but I dream of a day where I'm confident enough to say just hashtag business. Like
Yeah,
that's the dream. Build a team and
why
see.
not? Why not? And I mean, folks will come to understand that we have vastly different political views, and I hope that that will be really interesting for them. Uh, but I ain't got nothing against somebody starting a business and being really excited about it and working really hard and like making wonderful things. Like what I love so much, like, is that you just like, you make these gym products, which means that you literally played a huge role in people maintaining sanity during the insanity of COVID. And then you also, right? Or let's say it's straight during the insanity of lockdowns, right? But you also just make this amazing custom art stuff that I just find is such a great way, because it's really important. Like I'm really the opposite of a minimalist. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
I come from a tradition, like you don't have to like you don't necessarily need a lot of money to make a lot of beautiful things, like our mom's a perfect example, you
yeah,
know but but it's really important to have these things in your life, where you're like, yeah, I'm proud of that,
yeah,
and your custom arts, like often like all the this is Mike's workshop or whatever, like that puts the finishing touch, and that puts like a smile on somebody's face again and again and again, right?
yeah, for sure, for sure. Definitely, like one of the perks of running a business is like, you serve people, and that's exactly what it is. Like,
Yep.
to serve is really to give. And I mean, obviously it's an exchange in the world of business, but really you're exchanging a good for a good, it's the goods and services. So I get money and people get happy, and like, we're all happy along the process. Yeah, it's very cool to do.
Well, and because I really think of myself primarily, aside from doing these YouTube things, the YouTube is just one branch. It itself is like a multiple branch. I like fractals,
Yeah,
but that's one branch of what I would call my bigger project, which is really educational research, right? And I think you know you could probably talk endlessly about how much you've had to learn and how much you're always in a learning process when it comes to the business. Like
yeah.
you're not just like, okay, I mean, of course there is a lot of fucking repetitive tasks with your business.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But
It's
you keep on learning,
Yeah, that's definitely the name of the game. And it actually, like, you learn while you're learning to learn while you're learning. Like, I don't know if that makes any sense, but
It
like,
makes tons of
like
sense, absolutely.
there's a million repetitive tasks in all businesses, and it, like, at first it became something you have to focus and do and look at, but now it's like I'll um, I'll consume like hundreds of hours of books and podcasts while I'm working.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
My hands are doing the work, but my brain's working on this business, and it's like,
Okay.
I do have, like, it's a unique advantage where, say I'm charging a shop rate of $60 an hour, and and I quote somebody, it's gonna take an hour, and I end up spending 3 hours, but I told them it was gonna be an hour, so that's all I could charge them. But I like to think it's like that 3 hours, like, yeah, I'm serving someone, but I also got to serve myself, so if I'm like,
Yeah,
if I'm doing something and it ends up I'm making like pennies on the dollar, like, I can't tell you how many times I worked for $2 an hour, but I also like was reading a book, or I was relaxing and watching a movie at the same time. So was I
sure.
really working, and like you said,
Yeah,
like, there's a bit of art and custom work that goes into it. And it's that old saying, like, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day of your life.
yeah, 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 yeah.
But yeah, so I don't know. I think we touched a little bit on ourselves. I'm sure we'll get into deeper as we kind of figure out just
Yeah, well, I think the best way to talk about yourself is to not talk about yourself. That's what I'm on about these days. So I really liked your idea. Um, you know, we could, I guess, just reveal it to the audience now, right? John had this great idea where we would talk each about one podcast that we've recently gotten into,
yeah.
and then see where that conversation takes us.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think basically what I was thinking is, like, first of all, is we uh, uh, include our ever-growing audience, that like we include on
For
what we're
sure,
listening, and what
for sure.
what they're listening, and what people are listening to. So basically about building kind of some recognition, because I'm sure well, just as you have a few podcasts that you kind of listen to a bit more, like,
Frequently, yeah.
I would say, like, religiously, like, you'll follow it, you'll watch you'll watch these guys on a weekly or monthly basis.
Right.
But also there's ones that comes and goes, and like there's going to
Oh,
be
for sure.
some that are like pretty hot, or sometimes it's just one episode. Like, I'll really, I'll find someone and be like, oh damn, like that was really cool. Like, he was on Timcast IRL as a guest, but then the next week he's on Joe Rogan, and it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
now
I
I
see
start
what you mean.
hunting podcasts where this guy is on, because
Yep.
like there's a lot of big names that are going around, and they're not
Yeah,
hosting
yeah.
their own
Well,
podcast.
that's interesting. That's something that's not talked about, is the role of the podcast guest, right?
Yeah,
And so but I also think it's just like, there are some podcasts that are good where it's kind of just like one person, like because this isn't the one I'm going to mention, I'll just say it now. Like Cal Newport's like Deep Questions is an excellent podcast, started in the pandemic, but it started out just him kind of answering listener questions, you know what I mean? And there's something about a dialogue podcast, or this idea, all of the best Cal Newport podcast episodes are when he had a guest on, and I think
yeah,
everybody would agree with that.
yeah, I don't doubt it. And that's part of, like, doing a co-host kind of thing. Like, I don't think I couldn't see myself doing like a monologue podcast. So I think,
Yeah, oh, I'm gonna do it because I'm boring like that,
yeah,
but
well, more power to you. But that's what I'm saying. Like, for myself, I couldn't see it. So I'm glad that we're doing this. And like, I think the more, like, the bigger the better. Like, if
Mhm.
you see some of these podcasts that like become like quite a show, and they have like 4 or 5 guys commenting, and like, and it's not like it's not like a big, like, Knights the Round Table and there's a bunch of people talking over, but like
Yeah.
normally it's like a host and a co-host that are pretty regular. And then you normally have like the research guy, or he'll pull up stuff on the screen. But it's interesting because they play that role, but then depending on the host, like, they'll be quite inclusive, like, hey, you who does like so much work for me, what's your opinion on this?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
You
yeah.
really get some real people opinions. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Cal Newport has started to do that. He wanted to up his quality. So one of his listeners actually wrote to him and said, "Hey, dude, like, I'm a sound guy. I could help you out. We can make this better." And now they have this kind of bit, most new episodes, where they just go back and forth,
yeah.
and it's awesome. It's a great, like, it's yeah, I think that, I mean, it will be known of Peter Shaw that he is in favor of worker recognition.
Absolutely. As is any good capitalist.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So let's get into it. Do you want to take the reins? Do you have
Sure.
your podcast of choice? And
You saw
describe the episode.
Very observant video watchers will have noticed a little, I don't even know how to call the expression, but almost a little wink when you said listen to these podcasts religiously. One of the coolest podcasts I've found. So let's take one step back.
Yeah.
Are we talking about podcast episodes or a whole podcast as a library?
So I'll go back to what I think of this concept. So basically, my idea is pick an episode of a podcast, recent or in history, that you think is worth mentioning out of relevance or like preference to you. And but like I want to break it down into like if it's a podcast we haven't talked about, yes, I want to know like who and what and like any kind of history or points or important notes of the podcast.
Okay, so give it a bit of an introduction.
Yeah, but I do think it's still based off an episode, but you can do that like 2 weeks ago. Be the same guy.
For sure.
About the person.
For sure.
And then so talk about podcast as a whole episode, and then any other like pertinent details. So like topics you actually want to discuss between me and you, and or guests that they had, and just the details that they bring up on the show. But we'll just kind of dissect it and bring another view to the table. And like I said, like we're like the newscast, the podcast. I don't know what it's going to be, but we'll kind of steer this in whatever direction it goes. But it
sounds like a plan.
Yeah, so take it away. I'll
okay. Well, honestly, with that clarification, that actually makes it much more difficult to stick with the decision I made. But I've been, studying the value of sticking to it, or what's called grit. What Scott Barry Kaufman on the psychology podcast, which is not the podcast I'm going to be talking about, he talks a lot about grit. Angela Duckworth, the researcher on grit, sticking to your initial plan. So so that was a way to get around it. But what I would talk about, very similar vibe, but to the psychology podcast, but honestly, something that's been really important for me this year, right, is this re-immersion in my Christian faith. And so that led me to do these podcast, kind of like, I have a young adults group.
Yeah.
They recommended a podcast. One day somebody recommended The Bible for Normal People. So that's the one I want to talk about.
Yeah, that's a very good title. That's the name of the podcast.
Name of the podcast.
Yeah,
and
really
so
like
it's Jared Bias and Pete Enns. And what's fascinating about them is that they don't always agree on everything, which is nice to see. I think, it's like you can't have a podcast called The Bible for Normal People and then expect there to be like, total agreement on everything. And that's been a really interesting part of diving back into faith this year. But so I will talk about the one episode that has just spoke to me the most. But just to say, so similar to the psychology podcast, there's often a special guest, and the special guest will then kind of be the source of the podcast. So the first one I was introduced to was an episode on monsters in the Bible. So it mainly talked about the book of Revelations, but it was about monster critical theory, a way of reading to prioritize the monsters and see what that does to the way you interpret the story, whether for good or for bad, and so on and so forth. So discussing that. But the episode from that podcast that I think is my most important one is the one with Richard Rohr. Okay, so I think it's episode 2, and they did it as a rerun on episode 40.
That would
If
have been like one of their, so that was their second show, right?
yeah, Richard Rohr is a pretty important figure. As far as I understand, he's a Catholic Franciscan monk by training. But he really got just like I have in my time because of my study of theater in particular, and contemplative dance and somatic movement training. I've also just, and just because I'm a hippie at heart, I've really gotten into Buddhism, yeah, and so Richard Rohr is really into Eastern, understanding Eastern religious practices and how they might inform our conception of Christianity to allow us to kind of live more deeply in that faith. And so I'll just finish by sharing the key insight of that podcast is, or that episode is, he talks about his tricycle model, which has been really the model that I've used to feel a lot more confident. Okay, whenever it's like I feel like I've been able to
First of all, what's the model?
yeah, I'll explain it. So but I just want to qualify like why it's so good is that I really feel like, to kind of use the Cal Newport language, I really feel like I 10x my confidence from this model. And so what it is you can imagine a tricycle, okay, has 3 wheels.
Yeah.
The front wheel is a bit bigger, right? It also drives you forward, and it's what steers you. Okay.
Yeah, actually, tricycles have reverse, which is pretty cool.
Oh, interesting. I don't know too much about that, but oh, you mean the reverse pedaling?
Yeah, because
the
Sure. Pedals are connected to the wheel, not a sprocket or anything.
Sure. Well, that's a good addition to the metaphor. He doesn't go that deep, but I've been thinking a lot about the importance of, when you make a metaphor, go as deep as possible just to see what it does. Maybe you realize, let's just keep it at the middle level. But so what he says is the front wheel is experience, okay? Your experience of the world, and the back 2 wheels, one of them is scripture and one of them is tradition, right? And so I don't want this to turn necessarily into the Bible for normal people too. I'm obviously gonna, just be myself and throw in some Christian stuff, but
for sure, I do think that's the idea. Like, tell me your thoughts, and and then
for sure
to respond to what you tell me.
Well, one of my thoughts is that like I recognize that tons of wonderful people in the world are not Christians, and apparently, the numbers in England, apparently I don't think we heard you there.
Oh, I said, but they might become one. You never know. That's the goal, right?
Well, that's true.
Good news.
But if I've done my work well, no, but so I want to include them, and I just want to say that this tricycle model, though it's kind of like, I think Richard Rohr uses it for some like institution that he now has or whatever, but you can use that as a frame, just like Jordan Peterson talks about the Bible and kind of makes it like very individualistic and is just like, this is how we can look at it as a psychological document, as a series of right. And so in the same way, you could look at this tricycle model, and just to clarify, scripture doesn't have to mean just the Bible. Scripture means, what books are you reading, right? And tradition doesn't have to be going to church every Sunday. Tradition can be, hey, are you having a meal with your family every now and then? Are you celebrating a meaningful birthday? Are you, doing Christmas? Are you, or whatever.
I guess like as hosts and talking to an audience or our ever growing audience, I should say.
Yes, growing every second.
Yeah, let's a funny inside joke comes up. Let's try and dissect it a bit. But yeah, the Christmas of Wonders this year, I think, a problem that many Canadian families face is like there is just a huge division,
Oh,
and
undeniable.
in Canada,
Undeniable.
and it's mainly, it's opposing political views, but I think it's more like, I mean, that's what it is made up to be in the headlines. But I think a lot of people are saying one thing and other people are saying the other thing. Both people seem to think they're right and mean well. So,
Yeah, for sure.
I think we just had half the family on one side and, 2/3 of the family on the other side. And,
That's a
everybody
good way to put it. That's honestly a good way to put it.
yeah, but just so people have that context on that. We'll go back to where we were, but
Yeah.
yeah, basically
That's because you're
had his
bad at
Christmas
math,
together.
right? That's
What's that?
like that's because you're bad at math that you said it that way.
Yeah, I don't know. Try to be wise, Pete. I don't know. But yeah, so I
all
like
the wisest people are really bad at math. Like Albert Einstein was terrible at math, at least in the school context.
yeah. 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 So anyways, like many Canadian families, we had a stressful holiday season with
Yeah.
opposing views, but thankfully we spent it together, and I think
Yeah.
we're slowly building back our loving ways as we all mature in our own viewpoints.
Yeah. Hey, I mean,
Uh,
we're all human. We're all fallible.
yeah. So now that the viewers have a brief and undefined background into that joke, continue. So
No. I mean, that's basically it. That's basically the thing, right? And so then I would just say it's like the other Christian influence, I could talk about a podcast that's no longer on the air, but if I did that, then it wouldn't be fair, because I think it's definitely your turn to talk about yours. Otherwise,
yeah, okay,
I'll
but
get into another podcast.
yeah, but let's try and get a bit of back and forth. So give me I'll try and comment on it, but first give me like your so why did you pick this podcast? Like what
Sure. Oh, okay. You want to do that? Yeah, for sure. Okay. So here's the thing. I mean, because I recognize this is going to sound a bit meta, right? But I recognize, just like I kind of mentioned the psychology podcast, right? Like I recognize that citing a podcast, right? Something that is basically a library, right?
yeah
The mini library of really well curated information, right? Because especially these podcasts like the Socialist, but the Bible for Normal People, the Tightrope podcast was the one that I was going to talk about. That's done. There's a couple others I could name, but what's crazy about that is like it's smart people curating the content, and they're trying to be kind of elegant. And so like I'd love, honestly, just scrolling through a list of podcasts and looking at the episodes. And the thing about the Bible for Normal People is every title, for me, now that I've dived a bit deeper in my faith, every title is like, oh, tell me more.
yeah
You know what I mean? And I used to think that that if you wanted to be a Christian, like I spent a lot of time in my life being very explicitly anti-Christian.
yeah
Let's not forget.
cold
And
consideration.
well, no, after a cold incineration, that's nothing. That's vaguely Shakespearean, but I flatter myself. But after that, it was Ashes of the Cross, and my hit song was Decapitated Christ, right?
Wow.
So
That wouldn't do too well at the dinner table these days.
correct. No, yeah. So just to say that because I used to have this idea that being a Christian was this very fixed thing, because, for example, my experience of church was very static and boring, and every time I tried to like have fun and sing in harmony, it would be like stop trying to sing in harmony, whereas now I go to church and we sing the Psalms in 4-part harmony. And I don't know how familiar you are with the Psalms, that book of the Bible, but it's like all of these, giant cries for either like grief, okay, from a Jewish people in exile. My Bible history is still not that good, or it's these shouts for joy, right? And at my church we sing that in 4-part harmony, and so it just sounds so beautiful to me to kind of connect this. And so I realized, okay, there's a way to actually let this, it's like I used to always like not know what to do with my time, especially during the pandemic. Okay. Now I can't control it. You know what I mean? I have so much to listen to, so much to learn.
I'm going to come in with a question here. So
yeah.
Okay. So it's called. Remind me of the name again.
A Bible for Normal People. Yeah.
Okay. So a Bible for Normal People. Now.
The Bible. Yeah.
The Bible. Okay.
Yeah. Like it's really about Bible study.
Yeah. Okay. It's very, very good.
Like very particular.
My question is, typically most sects of Christianity would be would be going to a sermon or to church once a week.
Yep.
Okay. And as you mentioned, like, how do I word this? Okay. Does this podcast, would you treat it as somebody, like it says, it's the Bible?
Okay, listen to it once a week, you mean? Like listen to it religiously?
Yeah,
is that where you're going with this? No, I wouldn't make a ritual around that particular podcast because it's more intellectually stimulating, but continue the question.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's what I'm getting at. So in terms of it's really hard to word through this question. I think you stabbed it.
No, but just say what comes to mind, and I can say, oh, do you mean this? And you can say yes or no.
Yeah. So basically, like, so many people practicing to go to church once a week. Yeah. Some people maybe not get. They don't get. I don't want to say value, but they're going for the sake of going.
For sure.
And as an alternative, a podcast that brings the Bible to normal people.
Sure.
Like, is this a good starting point? Is this an alternative point?
Oh yeah, well, for sure, because again, like Pete Enns and Jared Bias, the hosts, like, and just the so let's say this thing first thing, since listening, like I started listening to this podcast because I started engaging in a Bible study, right?
Yeah.
And that Bible study, we decided to make it a little kind of more 21st century. And we said, we're not just going to read, a particular passage in a Bible. Let us listen to a podcast or watch a video.
Yeah. So it's like a podcast study. Which
right. Yeah. But let's most of the time there's been explicit references to the Bible in this podcast, which means there's probably 4 or 5 scripture readings in that thing. So we discuss those passages when we have the conversation. So anyways, but let's just say this, following this path, last night I spoke to the pastor of my church. Today, this afternoon, I spoke to the university chaplain for Ottawa U. Okay. Yeah. And so 2 different people, they're apparently good friends, and it doesn't surprise me. And I mesh with them because they're kind of intellectual. Like my priest studied physics, and that's really interesting. But both of them basically squared in on, like, if you really like, just like because I was just having some, I wouldn't say doubts. I was just going through some stuff, right? And I wanted to talk to them, right? And they said, just, like, look to the tradition, and that's really interesting because that would kind of skew the tricycle model.
Yeah.
But anyways, I just want to say that what they basically were saying is that you can be very hybrid about the traditions, right? So we don't necessarily like, I would say like it's absolutely a great place to start. And the thing that's great about it is it's a podcast that is super open and friendly and kind of like, yeah, for sure, they're like liberal leaning. Okay, so it's not going to be the cup of tea for like let's say like some like some people. I could just leave it at that.
Podcast
Yeah,
is liberal leading,
yeah,
leaning. Okay.
yeah. Right. So like one of the key episodes, I mean, Richard Rohr is a great guy, but one of the other key episodes for me that was just so like liberating to listen to was the episode called, the Bible and gay Christians, right?
Yeah.
Because that really helped me figure out a lot about myself, and why I could say, hey, like I kind of want to start getting curious about this Christian stuff again, at the exact same time that I kind of started coming out as gay and like to more than just like a small amount of friends. And there was obviously still a lot of like, what do I do with all the baggage, right? And the episode goes very clearly through some scriptures, and our modern interpretation of them, and gives a very like rational case for how to not even, and it's not like, oh, because a lot of people say, well, you just have to choose the best stuff, like a lot of Christians who want to defend gay people like do a profound disservice to gay folks by saying, well, if you really just kind of focus on the love, versus what the argument they lay out in that episode is like the main kind of, passages of kind of that justify, let's say, Christian homophobia are like, the stuff about Sodom and Gomorrah, a lot of stuff in the Old Testament about like, and they just say it frankly, like, well, I'll actually be PC about it, but egregious acts of sexual violence, right? Versus like, saying that there might be something to understanding the possibility for, two consenting adults to kind of have a loving relationship, and and anyways, and so on. And then you also have to kind of read what's good about the last thing that's good about this podcast is that it reads it kind of in light of modern day theology, which that field of kind of academic theology studies kind of says that, well, we should look at the Bible partially as kind of a document of literary creation, but still by real people.
Yeah.
Like fundamentally real people. Like it couldn't have come from nowhere. So it was fundamentally real people processing their experience in various literary genres. Okay. But so then there would also, there is just, of course, like insane amounts of health risks related to gay sex. And so just like there was insane amounts of health risks to eating pork, So there were reasons why when you were talking, just look at the kind of letters of the Apostle Paul talking about, like you should probably keep the gay folks away from your small, close-knit early Christian communities, because they might indeed carry diseases and it could be dangerous. You know what I mean? I'm probably not talking about that in the right way, and probably I said like 20 problematic things, and I'm still learning, and that's the point, right? But it's like I do actually defer to this idea that you can change the way you think about things even though they've really been hardwired, right? And that's what I think the benefit is in this kind of interaction, is we think differently, so we're bound to slightly shift our views, based on our conversations.
For sure, for sure. And I mean, I'll do my best, I think, to tread lightly now. I think a lot, I think more than anything, we're going to go through some conversations where we might disagree, but in a lot of cases, like you mentioned before, it's like I'm not really well read in this, and this. So like I'm not going to be able to make an argument. And like in many cases, I have my opinions, but just like you mentioned, like when you bring up um, a certain section of the Bible. Like I'm very unwell read in many
Sure,
cases, so
sure.
it's
And
definitely hard.
that's a great podcast to start getting well read in the Bible really quickly,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, no,
Because they've done so much work for you, and then they just give you the podcast basically for free, you know.
yeah, no, for sure. I think like you're describing, it's very very interesting. Like it's for normal people, and you know what is a normal person these days? So it's basically everybody because we're all more or less abnormal. But no, it's very
Yeah, no, yeah. Well, so
very
they also, like, just to be clear, like they have like a profound sarcasm. Like their tagline is, "It's the only God ordained podcast on the internet," right? So they're like, they're also kind of playing with this kind of Christian cultural machismo of like, obviously Christianity is the only right way, even though they kind of, they'll talk about interfaith topics, they'll talk about all kinds of different things. Um, but yeah, there's like, it's really fucking funny. Like that, I
yeah.
should have said that from the start. Like they are
No, no,
super,
I
yeah,
mean
it's
that's
very
definitely
ironic. It's very,
yeah. That's I mean that's definitely important to a podcast. Like I mean that's
oh yeah.
what are we doing if not to entertain people, right? Um, so I'll ask one more question
Okay, we
I
really
mean,
got to get on yours. I'm gonna have a million questions for yours.
no, but I
This is
mean
gonna be a
let's
long
first go at
podcast.
this. So we might end up posting
Two
hour long
episodes. Yeah, yeah,
podcasts, but
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
it is what it is, you know. And you know it's all part. Like I said, it's your first stab at it, but I do
We do a
like
part one and part two. That's honestly a strategy.
yeah, yeah,
It's
and like
the double header pilot episode.
exactly, exactly. And like you said, like there's all sorts of opportunities in this platform, which I'm sure we'll get into later things about a few people that really get into the whole like the why for podcasts. And it's like you get, you know, 2 hours of content that could be completely dissected and framed towards like all the different platforms and social media. But before I go too far on a tangent, so I like where we're going with the kind of pick a podcast, pick an episode, and dissect it. So I do have one question, so
Yeah.
that we can kind of keep with that theme. Is for people interested in this podcast. You mentioned the one episode he has a guest. So does he most of the time have a guest? First of all, is it always a guest?
So it's two hosts, Pete Enns and Jared Bias,
Yeah.
and they most of the time have guests.
Okay.
But there are some times where it's just Pete Enns talking through one of his theology theories or his interpretations of culture or whatever.
Almost like a sermon, correct?
Yeah, you could say that. You could definitely say that.
Okay. Okay.
Like
That
an
was like
hour-long sermon. But I would
yeah.
say but the thing is, like, you would say sermon because, as you said, you don't have too broad a reference, right? But with just a small broad reference, I would say, well, actually, within the Christian tradition, it's much closer to a thing that it does exist, which is a theology lecture.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So it's much closer to a theology lecture than a sermon. And that's actually a very different thing.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. And now, as I word through this slow multi-parted run-on question,
Yeah.
the main question was: so does, in terms of guests, like, have you watched multiple of his podcasts?
Yeah.
Podcast, sorry.
So listen. Yeah. So the way I think I know that you often use YouTube to get your podcast, but what I do is I use the app Castbox and I go for walks. Okay. So there's non-trivial neuroscientific evidence of the importance of walking for cognitive health and kind of going on slightly vaguely familiar but slightly different routes when you do those walks. And so that's what I do with podcasts. I think it helps me kind of remember the content a little bit better.
Yeah.
Anyway, so just wanted to clarify that point.
Yeah. So my question was, does he
Yeah.
like so yes, he has guests. Does he have guests
And
okay,
so yeah, I've listened to many of them. Does
yeah, so
he? Yeah.
are they just kind of
Are
explaining?
they are they kind of all on of a particular leaning
Yeah, does he
politically?
have the same kind of
Yeah,
guests?
yeah,
Does he have
yeah. Sure,
contradicting
sure,
guests?
sure,
What?
sure. Well, that's interesting because what I would say is I do listen to these kinds of podcasts very selectively
Mhm.
in
Like
relation.
in terms of what guests he's having?
No, so here's the thing. Yes, but that's not the level of order that's relevant here. The level of order that's relevant is I listen to these podcasts specifically related to projects I am working on at the moment, okay, within my life. Now, that could be a personal project, like, for example, trying to reconcile being a gay Christian. Uh, but it could also be, okay, I'm working on this thing for school, and I would like to, get a particular perspective about that kind of a topic. So that there've been a few cases where that's been necessary. Like the monster one, again, is another thing. I have this, okay, not necessarily a project, but I have this group, I have this thing in the world that I go to. So that's why I listen to that particular thing. And then some of the other ones, it's just like Jared Bias, the other host, he has an episode on the making of the modern mindset, which is of crucial importance to any teacher out there. It's just like you can't, as the teacher, not be thinking about how cultural forces in our society are shaping the way we think about things in general, right?
Yeah.
It's a little meta, and it's a little kind of dry, and that's kind of just himself, but yeah. Anyways, so I don't yet know, but yeah, so I don't yet know. I haven't listened to all of them. I don't yet know if there's like a bunch of like folks who, there might be like much deeper disagreement, which is what I assume you were kind of trying to get at with that question.
Yeah. Like I did want to. I basically wanted to get to a sense. Like, are they putting on a weekly thing of that's strategically aligned, or are they looking
Sure. No,
politically
well, I
aligned?
mean, yeah, no, I would say their
Like,
biases are present in every episode for sure, but
yeah,
as far as I understand, like, I mean, it's pretty diverse content, but it's uh
yeah,
it's hard to know, like, uh for example, because they both have like different experiences with church. I feel like there's probably certain like strands of Christianity that exist that they just don't engage with,
for sure. Okay, that's
as
yeah,
far as I know, but that might not be true either. That might not be true. Like, I just haven't looked at all the episodes yet. So
yeah. No, that's good. That's good. That's kind of what like I think I want to aim this. Like, let's dissect it. Let's give our opinions. Let's see what happens. So it's interesting. I think yeah, I think like for me, when I hear basically what you told me, like I think it's something well, me and my wife talk about a lot. Like we like
for sure, for sure, for
what we
sure.
should be listening to, what was as Christians, like what who we like, or hey, you should listen to this, or what do you think about this thing? Sometimes it's a 30-second clip, sometimes
Yeah,
it's a it's a podcast. So
for
and
sure.
like I said, like in the interest of these podcasts that get dissected, it's like sometimes you just go on a binge of like you find out about the Bible for normal people, and you go through like all their clips of like they have snippets and stuff, and
Right,
it's a good way to
right,
consume as well. And
right, right, right,
they kind of
right, right.
highlight their points. So
Yeah.
I think for
That's
me,
what I did with Cal Newport, but he's pretty much the only one, and that's because his content was specifically geared towards like, I need to have this repeated, like I kind of need to do a little brainwashing for myself, because it's the kind of thing that's going to solidify the habits that I need to do, and it's going to reinforce my actually implementing in the real world these habits. I'll come up with a bunch of like funny phrases that I could reference to make sure that I made a plan for the day. You know what I mean? But other than that, every podcast I listen to is project oriented.
Yeah, very cool. So I think to give my opinion based off what you told me,
Please.
I think how I would approach the Bible for normal people is I think I'd probably scroll through episodes, look for either guests or I don't know how they title, because like some people title by topic.
I could tell you.
So
it's mainly by topic, but they also title by guest.
I think that's how I would scroll through. Like I would probably, like for me, it sounds like the type of podcast I might listen to, once a month or once every here and there. They have a topic that pops up like, oh, that's interesting, or every once in a while you're like, I don't know what to listen to.
Exactly
this. I'll scroll through and it's like, the this and that.
Totally.
This and that,
Totally.
So that's my opinion. If you're cool, I think we'll pivot into the second half. We'll go into my part, but
yes,
I have an idea. Like I think, like you're mentioning, it is going pretty long for a episode. Without cutting it short, I think what you mentioned, like a 2-part, would be good. So with that in mind, I do want to like kind of do like a semi-close of this part one.
Sure.
And then take it on to the part 2.
Perfect.
So there's something I had in mind in terms of like closing episodes. So like something like a quick answer or something like different segments. So what I'll say is your current. So this will be the maybe the closing thing. I might get it, Justin. So your current top 3 podcasts, list it off. Like it could be top 3 all-time favorites or what you're listening to now. So give me your top 3, and then the fourth thing I would say is challenge me to like this upcoming week. What podcast should I listen to, and is there a specific episode? And then when we get to the part 2, we'll go into my thing. And we'll go through this whole thing, and then at the end, same thing. I'll give you my current top 3, whether it's
perfect. I love
listening to, and then I'll be like, Pete, I think you should listen to this episode of this podcast, and then we have a good like 15-minute intro to the next week's episode. So if that sounds good, give me your top 3, and then challenge the one you want.
Okay, the challenge. Sure. Okay, well, top 3. Well, so I'll be blunt, and I'll talk about my true 3 favorites. And the first one, it's Upstream. Dr. Cornell West and Dr. Trisha Rose. They started that podcast kind of also in the middle of the pandemic. It was super great, but they couldn't get enough funding to stay independent but make it work. They didn't want to do ads and stuff.
Name, or it's
called The Tightrope.
Okay.
So that's that's number 1, and it's on hiatus right now. Okay, number 2 is Upstream. That's the podcast that's mainly documentaries, but they also do interviews. It's on alternative economics, and it's I think one of the most well-produced podcasts on the internet right now.
And is there one host, multiple hosts, or
two hosts, Della Duncan and Robert Raymond?
Okay.
Yeah.
Number 3.
And the last one is definitely, I'm gonna kind of left field here, but because I already talked so much about Bible for normal people, I'm gonna say Change Lab.
Okay.
It's really, really super creative. Okay. And so I mean, you know what I would say, honestly, I would say in terms of the episode to listen to, I would say listen to any episode of The Tightrope that looks appealing to you. But if you really want me to say listen to one or the other,
I do.
I just say listen to the one. Okay, I'm still gonna give you options, but much more narrow. Okay, It depends what you want. If you want old school jazz, you go with Sonny Rollins. He celebrates his 90th birthday on the podcast. He's an old school jazz trumpeter. That
Yeah.
conversation is divine, but also Rakim. He's a rapper. Their conversation with him is very prophetic, to use Cornell West's language. Any one of them. Honestly, if you're looking for a laugh, I would say go with the Sonny Rollins.
Okay. Okay. Cool. And
Yeah.
so I just noted down quickly, and I think like this is a good like thing. Like if we're gonna put a description, like in down below, it'd be like,
Yep.
here's our top 3 for the week. Here's our
Yep.
challenge to watch this, and it'll kind of maybe create a bit of like catch and chase with our
Yep.
ever growing viewer community.
Sounds great. Sounds great. So, and do we
Cool.
do like a 2-minute pause to pee and or like 5-minute pause and then come back?
Completely unacceptable. Yeah, let's do it. Okay.
Okay, great. All right.